investigation he is currently conducting. So as of March 28th, the province of Saskatchewan has 30 new confirmed cases of COVID-19, bringing our total to 134. As of yesterday, number of individuals hospitalized remains unchanged at 6, one in acute care in the north, and one in Saskatoon, and one in Regina, and one in the ICU in Saskatoon, and one in Regina. We have at least 7 cases resulting from local transmission. The rest are all either travel related or their household contacts or related to mass gatherings, conferences, other events. And we've had now 3 significant events with secondary transmission. Of the confirmed cases, there are 5 under the age of 19. All the other cases are adults, 58 in the 20 to 44 age range, 49 in the 45 to 64 age range, 22 in the 65 plus age range. 57% are males and 43% females, and all this information is now posted online. We have an additional person who has fully recovered, so 4 out of our 134 cases are recovering. So again, this is important to recognize that most cases are mild. Many we anticipate will have full recovery after 2 to 3 weeks of symptom onset. To date, 8,248 tests have been performed by the Royal Romanov Provincial Laboratory. This figure ranks Saskatchewan number 3 in the country for testing of COVID-19. Our intention is to continue with an aggressive testing strategy to stay on top of case contact investigations, because these 2 elements are crucial to prevent further transmission, in addition to social distancing and other measures that all of us must observe. In the days ahead, the Ministry of Health will deploy additional staff to the Saskatchewan Health Authority to assist with contact tracing, to make sure that cases and their contacts are followed up in a timely way. Now I will ask Dr. Chukani to provide a bit more detail as the Medical Health Officer investigating the Christopher Lake Snowmobile Rally dinner held on Saturday, March 14th. Dr. Chukani, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shahab. Good afternoon, everybody. We became aware of an attendee at the Christopher Lake Snowmobile Rally supper on Saturday, 14th March, testing positive for COVID-19 on the afternoon of Wednesday, March 25th. Since then, we have interviewed this person to gather information regarding where they could have contracted COVID-19 from and the person the individual had close contact with since the possible exposure date. This list has been compiled and contact with the persons on this list is already underway. Those experiencing symptoms have been or are being scheduled for testing. All persons that attended the rally supper are asked to self-isolate for 14 days from the date of the rally on March 14th. This is extremely important to help contain the spread. If you attended the rally and have not yet been contacted and are experiencing symptoms, please call helpline at 811 to be assessed. Once you are assessed and they determine that you will need to be tested, your information will be passed onto a local testing site or primary health care clinic to schedule your appointment. We have learned that in addition to the 2 positive individuals that we identified, there were 3 other individuals who were symptomatic already in attendance and who have subsequently tested positive. We have to date had contact with 76 individuals, and we currently have 18 cases associated with the Christopher Lake Snowmobile Rally Supper. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chukani. So I'll just complete my remarks and then we'll open it up for questions. So as Dr. Chukani described the event and the investigation, this really demonstrates why we have been reducing the size of the gatherings in Saskatchewan, and why we really emphasize that while we love celebrating and getting together in Saskatchewan, this is not the time. This is the time for social distancing.
Are you tired of the media spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? Well, take a look at this. Over the last 3 years, while the establishment media was pushing false narratives and uncorroborated evidence, we investigated and shed light on some of the deepest government corruption in this nation, something that makes Watergate look like nothing in comparison. And take a look at this. At a time when American corporations have been bowing to the Chinese Communist regime, the Epoch Times has been exposing the atrocities that the communists have committed inside of China, as well as how they've gutted America's manufacturing base, sent over crate loads of poisonous synthetic drugs, and have forced Hollywood to censor the movies that you and I watch. And take a look at this. While the establishment media politicized their coverage of the border crisis, we send our team of reporters down to the border, and they've been wading through the Rio Grande River, going on ride-alongs with the sheriffs, interviewing the border crossers, and giving Americans an accurate understanding of the crisis at the southern border. And take a look at this. Our opinion section is awesome, especially at a time when both the establishment media and these giant tech conglomerates are censoring American public discourse. Our opinion section gives a platform to truly unique perspectives. So if you want to try an honest and wholesome newspaper that doesn't spin the truth and instead gives you the facts, click that button below and try the Epoch Times yourself for a full month for just $1. And not only will you get all of these phenomenal feature sections, but take a look at this. While the establishment media have been pushing false narratives in their reporting of the current administration over the last 3 years, our team of reporters in the White House worked to give you an accurate picture of what the administration is doing. And take a look at this. While the mainstream media has been normalizing both socialism and communism, the Epoch Times has been investigating and exposing the subversion of America's schools, churches, media, and government by these two deadly ideologies. And better yet, your eyes will feel so good reading this newspaper because we just increased our font size by 20%, making the words easier to read and easier on your eyes. And take a look at this. While the establishment media is often critical of and even hostile to traditional values, we've given tradition center stage and have been sharing the accumulated wisdom, knowledge, and virtues that have been passed down in our cultures for thousands of years. And take a look at this. We have, in my opinion, some of the best puzzles in the country. Our team of puzzle masters creates 2 new pages of crosswords, word searches, sudokus, and so much more for every issue. They are phenomenal and will keep your mind fresh and active. And take a look at this. The Epoch Times' health section focuses on holistic health, how you can improve your physical, mental, and emotional well-being to achieve a truly vibrant state of health. And take a look at this. The Epoch Times' food section is phenomenal, and it gives you healthy recipes that don't just look good in pictures, but taste delicious in your home. And take a look at this. Not only can you read the news and features in print, but you'll also be able to read it on your tablet, smartphone, and your computer. Read it however you want. It's super convenient. So click on that button below and try the newspaper yourself for a full month for just $1, and not only will you get all of this phenomenal content, but we'll send you a very special gift, a giant investigative poster that took our reporters 18 months of research to put together, documenting how federal agencies were politicized and weaponized at the very highest levels during the 2016 election. This is the real story of collusion that you won't be reading about in the mainstream media. And this poster is truly a piece of history. So if you're looking for a newspaper that respects and honors America's traditional values, check out the Epoch Times. Click on that button below, try the paper yourself for a month for just $1, get your free poster, and stay truly and honestly informed. Just click on that button below.
This is the time to remain connected together as groups to have a meal or share a meal or have events where you are closer than 2 meters and are touching things that are passed back and forth. But I do want to emphasize that COVID-19 continues to present as a mild illness in the majority of cases. Because we have community transmission, we should take care no matter where we live in the community. Wash your hands often. Only go shopping if you're well. Go and just purchase essential supplies and wash your hands when you come back. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth while you're out and about. If you have any symptoms, fever, cough, isolate yourselves immediately. It doesn't matter if you have traveled or not traveled, if you have been to any mass gathering or not. If you develop symptoms of fever and cough, isolate yourselves, stay at home, separate yourselves from your household members, call helpline for advice. And we really need to now observe this for the next few weeks in order to flatten the curve. And like I said yesterday, remaining physically distant does not mean remaining socially disconnected. Reach out through other means, stay in touch with family and friends, support members in your household, support your neighbors by doing shopping or running chores for them, but leaving groceries in a safe manner. And, that is the way that we will get over this. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shahab. Operator, do we have a question? We have Stephanie Davis with CTV.
Yes. Are there any guidelines that people coming into Saskatchewan from other provinces should be following right now?
Thank you, Stephanie. So as you know, anyone coming from overseas now has to isolate themselves at home for 2 weeks. So that means you have to stay at home for 2 weeks, even if you're asymptomatic. If you become symptomatic, you should isolate yourself within the house from other household members and call helpline for further advice. You should not go shopping for those 2 weeks if you come from overseas. You can go to your backyard, or if you're totally asymptomatic, go for a solitary walk. But don't go to places where you are touching surfaces others will touch, like doors or elevators in public places. So that's the guideline for international travelers. We did have a caution for persons coming from other provinces showing COVID-19 cases, for example, BC, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec. Now really, since we have community transmission, we need to, it doesn't matter if you're coming from another province in Saskatchewan or whether you live in Saskatchewan, we need to be watchful and vigilant of our own symptoms. We need to maintain social distancing at all times and isolate ourselves from our own household members. And if we are essential workers, flag that for our employer if we get symptoms and seek direction from helpline.
Stephanie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, just one more. Is the province putting any plans in place to set up drive-through testing?
So we will provide a comprehensive summary of.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. I'm Joshua Phillip, senior investigative reporter with the Epoch Times, and we stand for truth and tradition. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This isn't just a mission of the paper, it's a mission of those involved in it. It's something we truly believe in. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. The Epoch Times is a nonpartisan media. That means we don't stand for any political party. Our values are truth. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Of how many assessment centers are now available in Saskatchewan on Monday. The various options are being considered to streamline testing, and as you know, our testing numbers are third highest in the country. So I don't have the specifics of any plans of drive-through that are being used in maybe another province or two provinces and in some other countries, but we'll provide an update on Monday.
We'll take our next question through the phone line, operator. We have Mickey DeJuric with Global.
Hi, this is Mickey from Global. Sorry. This is the most reported cases in a single day as of yet. Does this set us back in flattening the curve, or what happens now?
So that's really important thing to understand. So till 2 weeks ago, most of our cases were either travel related or related to household transmission in those travel related cases. So we could identify the chain of transmission, and that's good. While we remain concerned with travel related cases, and while we and the government of Canada has now made it mandatory to self-isolate for 2 weeks, we feel that if people who are coming back to Canada observe those protocols, we can reduce further transmission. Secondly, we now have 11 cases linked to an event in Edmonton, at least 3 cases linked to a conference in Vancouver, and now 18 cases linked to an event in Christopher Lake. So these are cases linked to a group event. So we can still identify the chain of transmission. We can account for those cases. Of the remaining cases which are under investigation, we now have 7 cases throughout Saskatchewan, Regina, Saskatoon, rural, central areas, rural, northern areas, where individuals have presented with a cough and fever, have been tested for COVID-19, are positive for COVID-19, and did not travel anywhere outside Saskatchewan in the last 14 days, did not attend any mass event. So here we cannot find the chain of transmission, and hence we are now saying that we have community transmission established. But further to your question, because 30 of the new cases, of those 16 were as part of the rally, in addition to the two identified earlier, the Christopher Lake Snowmobile Rally. The other cases are around 12. So that kind of explains that while it's a big jump and it's always concerning, at least we can explain 16 of those cases.
Mickey, do you have a follow-up?
Is there a window to narrow or flatten the curve, getting less and less as the days go by, or are we working toward the goal? Where are we in terms of our projections and goals of flattening that curve?
Yeah. So, our case numbers continue to rise. We are tracking our case numbers, or both in terms of total case numbers and case numbers per million population compared to, for example, Alberta and BC. So our rate in terms of case numbers is actually going up similar to Alberta. Our total case numbers are 1/4 of Alberta because we have a smaller population. And secondly, we were always predicting that while initially all the cases we were expecting were travel related, now we are seeing, obviously cases linked to group events and cases linked to community transmission. In order to flatten the curve, we need to obviously do 3 things. One, I talked about what people who are coming back to Canada need to do. Secondly, we have significantly restricted the size of any gathering to 10, down from 250 to 50 to now 10. But even if you have a gathering of 10, even there you have to maintain that 2-meter separation and not share food, not have a gathering where there can be a risk of community transmission. So even if we get together as 10 people in a work setting or in another setting, we still have to maintain that social distance. And finally, for the next little while, we really need to be very disciplined about keeping ourselves healthy. If you're out shopping, washing your hands before and going out and after coming back, and also, maintaining that social connectedness but physical distance with our friends and family who don't live in the same household.
We'll take our next question on the line, operator. We have Lynn Giesbrecht with the Leader Post.
Hi, Lynn Giesbrecht here. You mentioned new staff being sent to help the SHA with contact tracing. How many staff are you sending, and is there a difficulty in keeping up with all the contact tracing?
So I'm very proud to say that our public health colleagues, medical health officers, public health nurses, public health inspectors, other staff in the kept up to speed and have done 100% contact tracing. That is fantastic. We do realize, however, that as our case numbers rise, it does become harder and harder to do. Because what you have to do is when a case is reported, you have to interview the case several times to see what was the story in the 14 days preceding. And then if there's a group event and dozens of people are named, you have to follow up with each person. If a person didn't really go to a large event, you still want to understand how many people was that person in contact with, call them. Testing has to be done, so 8,000 tests done to date. The test results have to be, the people who are tested have to be informed whether the test is negative or positive. And if positive, then the whole contact tracing starts with every new batch of cases. A lot of this does not require people to be physically present where the contacts are, but we do need to train additional people to help public health colleagues to, make the telephone call to give test results, to, do that contact trace questionnaire. So that kind of work can be done over the telephone, and we really need to boost the capacity of the Saskatchewan Health Authority and Indigenous Services Canada and NISA to really be able to complete case contact investigations in a timely way. So that is essential to make sure that any case who is symptomatic is tested and is isolated, and any contact immediately goes into self-isolation for 2 weeks. If they complete the 2-week period, that's fine. If they develop symptoms during the 2-week period, they then need to isolate themselves further within their home and seek further advice from Healthline. Then do you have
Yeah, how many new workers are being added to that?
We will start doing an assessment with our partners. Regina and Saskatoon were already expanding their capacity. They were reaching out to health sciences students, medical students, other individuals who at the moment obviously can't go to class or can't work on the medical force, but we really need to supplement the capacity throughout Saskatchewan. So we don't have an exact number, but I fully expect that number to keep increasing and expanding to meet the needs.
We'll go to our next question on the line, operator. Do we have another question on the line? Sounds like we're having. Go ahead, Alicia.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So knowing now that you've had this many cases from one event where there were more than 100 people, do you now believe that stricter limits on gathering should have been implemented earlier?
I think we really were leading in terms of limits on gatherings, and really, in hindsight, you can say yes, maybe, but really, we started seeing our first cases travel-related about 3.5 weeks ago. So we think we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. But having said that, I think going forward, we need to be extremely vigilant, not just in even small gatherings in terms of still keeping that physical distance, but even in our day-to-day activities, whether they're social or whether they're, for those of us who are essential, when we go to work, we either need to be there, also we need to practice that social distancing.
You have a follow-up, Alicia?
Are you expecting a spike now in new cases from community transmission through those people at the snowmobile rally? How much of a spike, if that is the case, and is the risk higher in any individual communities in Saskatchewan, like places that are close to Crystal Lake?
So, public health is continuing to investigate all the people who attended that event, and the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and we have that link on our website. There's a number you can call. If anyone went to that event and weren't contacted by public health, they can call the helpline for further advice or the public health office in Prince Albert. But we have to understand that the rally happened on the 14th. By the 29th of March, anyone who went to that rally, if they're completely asymptomatic, they are fine. But if people even now develop symptoms, day 13, day 14, they must call Healthline and seek further advice.
We'll take our next question on the line, operator. We have Connor Donovan.
Hey, this
how many people were at that rally, the snowmobile rally, and how many, when you go over again, how many you've tested and how many are left to be tested? If you can't reach everybody.
So Dr. Chugani, I'd like you to maybe speak to that if you can. Did you hear the question?
Operator, do we have Dr. Chugani on the line?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Doctor.
Thank you. At the Christopher Lake Snowmobile Rally, there were around 250 people. From that, there was the Snowmobile Rally Supper, at which there were around 110 people. Unfortunately, we do not have a comprehensive list, and thus that was why when we did identify the positive case on the afternoon of the 25th, we managed to at least get some initial contact. And as Dr. Shahab mentioned, that is the importance of contact tracing and doing it in a timely manner. And thus the importance of people who did attend the rally supper to call and let us know, because we need to fill in the gaps.
Connor, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I think it was March 13th when the province limited gathering to 250 people. So I guess I'm just wondering if that gathering can be looked at as a violation, ruling, seeing as it happened on March 14th.
We will follow up on that to confirm the dates and when the information went out.
Connor, just to clarify, I believe it was announced on March 13th, effective March 16th. Okay. Operator, do we have a question on the line? Operator, is there a question on the line?
I just want to maybe make a few statements that, we have to be in this together. And I think we need to be very careful not to assign blame to any event. I think no one wants people to come to an event and get sick. And so I think we need to be very careful about that. I think we need to be supportive of people who either were at an event and are sick. We need to be supportive of people who are there and are waiting out the 2-week period. Obviously, we need to maintain our physical distance, but be supportive in any way we can otherwise. And even event organizers, it's a very stressful time for event organizers. Many have had to cancel their events. We can't predict when we will get back to normal. Will it be in the summer, in the fall? So I think it's a difficult time for all of us. We love in Saskatchewan to get together. This is not the time to get together, but this is also the time to support people who find themselves in this position, both organizers of events and also people who are at those kind of events. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Shahab. Operator, do we have another question on the line? We have time for about 3 more. Okay, we have Evan Radford with CJME.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Shahab. So, given that these restrictions on the amount of people gathering came out and were in effect on March 16th, is it surprising or unsurprising to you that we're seeing these numbers from the Criminal Bonspiel and also at Christopher Lake? And was this planned for in your modeling of how you and your colleagues predicted and modeled how many people would be infected?
So as we have seen from Europe and as we have seen from the US, from other provinces and now in Saskatchewan, COVID-19 moves fast and we cannot be complacent. And 3 weeks ago we were at a certain place. Every week we have tightened our restrictions. We are in a very different place now where only people whose jobs are essential for healthcare, fire, police, emergency services, grocery stores, trucking, other essential societal needs, only those individuals are going to work. Everyone else is at home. We are not encouraging any gatherings and have a limit of 10, but even there we are saying do not share items that can transmit COVID-19. So we are in a very different place, but obviously we still need to maintain that discipline because each one of us has a role. failing to observe that at an individual level adds up to cases. We need to observe that discipline. It doesn't matter if we're coming to Canada from overseas, if we live in Saskatchewan, if we're traveling from another part of Canada, and really need to, all of us need to individually, intellectually do the best we can to keep the curve as flat as possible. So it's hard to make predictions. Obviously, modeling estimates give worst case, medium, and best case scenarios. We'll be presenting our refinements of those models in future opportunities. But I think we have to aim for the best case, and that comes to all of us individually, doing what we can to maintain that physical distancing.
Evan, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. The Globe and Mail is reporting today we have tested 641 people per 100,000. Dr. Shah, do you think this is enough? And what is an ideal number for a province of our population to be testing when we talk about those per 100,000 ratios?
So we actually incidentally just did some calculations this morning, and so if we look at Canada and Saskatchewan, our test numbers performed per million are 6,980. So according to our calculations, those are 698. Those are 698 per 100,000, so probably near to where what your measurement was. And these are the third highest testing rates after Alberta, which is highest in British Columbia. So I think we are very proud of our partners in Roy Roanoke Provincial Lab and all our partners who are running assessment sites, primary care physicians who are testing that's happening in long-term care, acute care. This has been happening for the last 4 weeks. So, we're very proud that everyone is playing a role in testing people when they need to be tested. And we need to continue to stay ahead of the curve in terms of testing anyone who needs to be tested. First of all, doing that assessment, the self-assessment to the evaluation by Health9, and then determining who needs to be tested, testing them in a timely way. But as individuals, we need to step forward if we have symptoms, make that call, self-isolate ourselves. Even if you get tested and the results come 3 or 4 days, those 3 or 4 days are critical. You have to self-isolate yourself at the first sign of symptoms. If after 4 or 5 days you test are negative, and as you can see, out of the thousands of tests done, 134 are positive, the rest negative, then you are, as long as your fever is settled, you can go about your daily business. But you have to isolate right at the start of symptoms. You cannot go around business as usual till you get your test result back. And I think those steps are essential to make sure that we minimize further transmission.
We have time for 2 more questions on the line. Operator, do you have a question? We have John Cairns with the Battleford News Optimist.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The question I have, I'm just curious if we have any cases in the Battleford. We're contending with all kinds of rumors, speculation about whether or not there are any cases in our community. I'm just wondering if you have any details about our community that you'd be able to share.
I'm aware of one or 2 cases in the PA Battleford area, 2 cases of community transmission. I don't have an account of cases in travelers. We do have those north, central, south, and you can look online on that data. But we have to remember 2 things. COVID-19 could impact any of us. It could impact someone who's a healthcare provider. It can impact someone who's recently come back to Canada, someone who works in Saskatchewan, someone who came to visit from another province. We have to be very careful about respecting the privacy of individuals who test positive. We want to make sure that people feel comfortable stepping forward to get tested and give a lot of their history to public health in terms of conducting the contact investigation. That's done very confidentially. And it's not helpful at all now to know where those cases are in terms of communities, because the risk really is everywhere. And we cannot make any change in behavior depending on are we in this community or that community. I cannot emphasize that point enough, that we cannot use testing numbers or testing locations to guide our behavior. Behavior has to be same no matter where we are in Saskatchewan.
Do we have a next question on the line, operator? We have Tina Monteleone with PA Now.
Hi, I just need some clarification
First, is the total number 18 or 20 from the snowmobile rally of cases?
Dr. Chugani?
Yes, the total number as of midday today is 18 that we have as positive.
Okay, and then I understand that the boundaries have changed as far as the areas. Can you just confirm if Prince Albert is still a part of the central or northern part of the boundary map?
We will get that clarification. I don't want to make a guess, but we will get that clarification for Monday.
Okay, and do you know if there's, I understand that there was work being done to potentially set up a testing lab in Prince Albert that would be able to confirm cases. Where are you guys on that?
Dr. Chugani, do you have any information on that you can give today? Otherwise, we'll provide a comprehensive summary of testing sites on Monday, but I just want to ask if you had any information.
No, I think we'll wait until Monday.
Thanks very much, everybody. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chugani.
But we want to begin right now with the latest headlines. The number of cases in the U.S. jumped again overnight to at least 102,000, with 1,600 deaths now. The U.S. now has more reported cases than any other country in the world. Nearly 45,000 of those cases are in New York State.
And some good news for the tens of millions struggling because of coronavirus. Those relief checks from the federal government could be in your hands in just 3 weeks. President Trump signing a $2 trillion relief bill on Friday. And some states are resorting to more drastic measures to stop the spread. In Rhode Island, police are stopping drivers with New York plates telling them to quarantine themselves. And Florida's governor is telling people coming to the state from coronavirus hotspots they need to self-quarantine as well.
Our team is covering the story across the country and around the globe this morning. We want to begin with NBC's Erin McLaughlin in Los Angeles.
This morning, across the country, over 100,000 cases, more than 1,500 dead, and an all-out war against COVID-19.
We go out there today, and we kick coronavirus ass.
The state of New York now with the grim distinction of being the epicenter of the crisis in the United States. Friday, the death toll surged from 385 to more than 500. Among the lives lost, Mount Sinai nurse Caius Kelly.
He just had this infectious energy. You felt good when he was around.
Friday night, all across the city, a show of appreciation for those on the front lines. Doctors continue to warn the system's overwhelmed.
It's like a war zone. We're in a war with very limited resources.
And a scramble to build makeshift morgues and field hospitals. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to NBC's Lester Holt.
I hope this whole facility, Lester, stays empty. And we built it for nothing.
But you don't believe that's going to be the case?
The numbers don't say that's going to be the case.
In California, it's all hands on deck.
Every minute is a minute lost.
A dire warning from officials. Los Angeles is just days away from the kind of crisis engulfing New York. This weekend, the USNS Mercy is expected to open, providing much-needed support to non-COVID-19 patients. As impressive as this ship is, it represents only a fraction of the city's needs. It has 80 ICU beds. LA officials estimate they need 3,000. New Orleans, too, emerging as a hotspot in the pandemic. NBC's Blaine Alexander.
Now, with the cases here in Louisiana growing faster than anywhere else in the world, the reality is that there are just not enough tests to confirm every case.
In Miami, a mandatory curfew. Orders to stay off the streets from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
It is growing quickly. I mean, every time I go into work, we have at least a few more cases.
Now there's a statewide ban on vacation rentals, in addition to a mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone arriving from Louisiana and New York. In Rhode Island, police stopping cars with New York plates.
Right now, we have a pinpointed risk that we need to address, and we need to be very serious. And that risk is called New York City.
That was NBC's Erin McLaughlin reporting.
And also this morning, hospitals hospitals across the country should hopefully be getting more ventilators after President Trump, under pressure, officially invoked a little-used power of the presidency to get a major automaker to pitch in. But that automaker says they were already on it. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is at the White House with the very latest on that. Kelly, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kristen. Despite the president's reluctance early on, he is now using the federal government's power to manufacture more ventilators and buy more where available over the next 3 months. A tight timeline given the number of serious illnesses from coronavirus continues to rise in hotspots around the country. President Trump moved from talk to action on forced manufacturing of medical equipment.
Ventilators is a big deal.
After 9 days of discussing the Defense Production Act powers, Friday, the president finally used it when he says negotiations with General Motors to build ventilators hit a roadblock.
We didn't want to play games. If they don't treat you right, I don't call.
In a remarkable turnaround, the president, who had insisted last week the federal government is not the nation's shipping clerk.
We have to get these people on board. We're not looking to get into a big deal on price.
Now says the U.S. government can order ventilators to supply states and allies.
If we do not need them, that would be wonderful. We can help a lot of great people all over the world. We can help them live.
Bristling at demands and complaints from some governors, Mr. Trump made known his expectations.
I want them to be appreciative.
As the virus spreads and deaths climb, the president backed off his push to ease restrictions by Easter Sunday, saying he will consult medical experts.
Life, that it's your safety, and if we need more time, they're not going to have a problem waiting it out.
The president was surrounded by Republican leaders as he signed the largest relief package in U.S. history. Democrats were not invited to attend.
I want to thank Republicans and Democrats.
Today, President Trump heads to Norfolk, Virginia to send off a Navy hospital ship. NBC's Courtney Cubie.
The next time the USNS Comfort is scheduled to be in port is in New York City. The 1,000 beds on this hospital ship will ease some of the burden on New York City's overwhelmed hospital system.
It sends a signal when the president is able to go there and say thank you.
And President Trump will return to the White House after his visit, saying he'll be very careful not to shake hands while in Norfolk. And General Motors is saying that it is working around the clock tirelessly and had been already agreeing to do this work when the president invoked the Defense Production Act. They hope to have in their Kokomo, Indiana production facility 10,000 ventilators made each month. Kristen?
A lot of hospitals eager to see that equipment soon. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you from the White House. Meantime, there is some hopeful news this morning in the fight against the coronavirus. The FDA has approved a new test that could give patients results in as fast as 10 to 15 minutes, helping to pinpoint the rapid spread of this outbreak. 50,000 tests a day are expected to be delivered as soon as next week. The agency is also expediting the use of an experimental new treatment that uses the blood plasma from recovered coronavirus patients to treat those who are seriously ill.
As we've been reporting, New York City has become the epicenter of this outbreak. We want to bring in Saira Madad. She is the Senior Director for the System-Wide Special Pathogens Program for New York City Health and Hospitals. She's been working for years to prepare that city for a health emergency. She's also featured in the Netflix documentary Pandemic, where she predicted something like this could be in our future.
What worries me is that it just takes one person to start an outbreak. We're basically human incubators. We can host a number of different diseases. It's just a matter of time where the next pandemic is going to start. We just don't know where or how, but we know it will.
Saira Madad joins us right now. Saira, we appreciate your time on this day. We know that on Monday we hit the end of that 15-day window, the end of the 15 days to stop the spread that the White House is telling us about right now. Can you give us a progress report? Are we making progress? Is there a sense that we might be out of this window at some point soon?
Well, we're still very early on in this epidemic here in the state of New York, and we're obviously not alone. What's going to happen here is going to happen in major cities throughout the country just in a matter of days to weeks. And so a lot of these cities are not far behind New York City, so you're seeing what's happening in New
Orleans, you're seeing what's happening in Miami and other areas like Dallas. And so, we are obviously the epicenter today. Tomorrow is going to be another city. We just need to make sure our first and foremost priority is making sure that our frontline staff have the resources and equipment that they need. And it is coming in, but we just need to continue to advocate for it and get more of it, because it's not a matter of just a one-time injection. This is something that needs to continuously happen.
And following up on the question about the timeline, of course, we've heard President Trump talk about the fact that he would like to reopen at least parts of the economy by Easter Sunday. He seemed to back off of that a little bit yesterday, as our Kelly O'Donnell noted. But can you put this into perspective, Cyber? What is the risk of reopening things too quickly?
Well, if we open the economy sooner and basically back down on social distancing, what you're going to see is much higher morbidity and much higher mortality associated with coronavirus disease, and an even more taxed healthcare system. Right now, healthcare systems are being overwhelmed, not just here in the state of New York, but obviously across the nation. You're seeing more and more cases pop up. And what's going to happen is that they're going to continue to become very, very overwhelmed. So when people need to seek care, not just for coronavirus disease, but for other health alignments that are still existing in today's world, people are still having babies, people are still getting in car accidents, heart attacks, we won't be able to provide great services for everything else that's going to be coming through those doors. So we need to make sure that we are not overwhelming healthcare systems.
Syra, we know that teams, emergency responders, have been preparing for a pandemic like this for years, but now we witness the scramble to try to get those supplies that they need urgently right now. How were we caught so short when it comes to tests and PPE, personal protective equipment, and all of the items that those first responders, nurses, and doctors need right now?
Well, at the end of the day, we rely on a just-in-time, supply chain when it comes to healthcare services. We don't keep a surplus of 4 or 5 months of personal protective equipment or equipment and supplies. You have enough resources that you need for a given time period, and it makes sense because obviously you don't want to waste resources if you don't need it. So it's the just-in-time economy and supply chain that we work towards. And so when instances like this happen, it's hard to predict how aggressive they're going to be or what their impact is. And so by the time you want to order more supplies, you have what you call even hoarding, not just shortages, but hoarding of equipment and supplies happening around the nation. And this is not something new. We saw this in H1N1, we saw this in Ebola, where people are ordering more than they need. And so those folks that actually need it, it's a backlog.
Syra Madon, we appreciate your expertise and your time this morning. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, police officers nationwide are putting their lives on the line, as they always do. But this time, it's to make sure people obey government orders to stay home and to keep at a distance while they're outside. NBC's Kathy Park is in Studio 1A with that part of our coverage. Kathy, good morning to you.
Kristen, good morning. As we continue to stay apart to help slow the spread of the virus, officers are patrolling the streets to enforce social distancing. It appears a crackdown is working in some places, but the message isn't getting through to everyone.
These days, officers from California to New York are on the front lines keeping you safe by making sure you're keeping your distance.
But they have been enforcing it? Yeah, totally have.
That means breaking up large gatherings, crammed parks, and even monitoring businesses with growing lines.
There is no congregating allowed.
A ramped-up response after crowds were seen defying federal health guidelines. In New York City, the epicenter of the outbreak in the U.S., people are searching for relief from the indoors, heading outside for fresh air or some exercise, but reminded to play it safe.
I think people are pretty good at keeping their distance from each other. Everybody has the same goal in mind, to not spread it.
Mayors across the country giving police the lead on enforcing the rules, even if that means patrolling from hundreds of feet in the air.
That if we see people in groups, we're going to break them up. If we see a place that's too crowded, we're going to get people to disperse.
They will be issuing warnings and shutting down all repeat offenders.
Here in New York City, to give people some more options to spread out, several blocks have been closed off to traffic so pedestrians can move freely.
But during this outbreak, more officers are getting sick too. More than 500 uniformed members of the NYPD tested positive for COVID-19. A sobering reminder of the risks of policing during a pandemic.
I appreciate them. I appreciate them a whole lot.
And if crowding continues to be an issue here in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio has said parks could be the next to close. A decision on that will be made tonight. Kristen, Peter?
All All right, Kathy Park, thank you for that report from New York.
Normally at this time of year, the race for 2020 would be at a fever pitch with candidates crisscrossing the country asking for your vote. But in light of the coronavirus, the campaigns are looking a lot different these days, obviously. NBC's Jeff Bennett has much more on that and what the candidates are trying to do about it. Jeff, good morning.
Hey, Peter, good morning to you. The coronavirus pandemic has temporarily transformed nearly every aspect of American life, including the race for the White House. Virtual campaigning is now the new norm for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And with President Trump seizing the national spotlight day by day from the White House, the Democratic candidates have had to find new ways to connect with voters. While the remaining 2020 presidential candidates are used to seeing adoring crowds on the campaign trail, the coronavirus pandemic has forced them to find new ways to connect with voters. For President Trump, daily briefings are now his daily substitute for campaign rallies.
We've done one hell of a job, and it's lucky that you have this group here right now for this problem, or you wouldn't even have a country left.
The president, who initially downplayed the virus's impact, boosting his re-election bid by blanketing the airwaves, with the leading Democratic candidate left pushing for a higher profile. Former Vice President Joe Biden, like most Americans, is following the CDC guidance to stay at home, and it threatens to blunt his momentum. Biden's campaign this week installed a television studio in his basement to help step up his public presence.
I'm chomping at the bit, but I am, and I hope to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and I hope I'm able to get my message across as we go forward.
Biden now holds virtual press briefings, appeared on a digital edition of Jimmy Kimmel.
Are you able to stay away from people during this time? Well, I'm not officially quarantined, but I'm trying to follow the rules here.
He even hosted a virtual happy hour.
None of us want to be cooped up in our homes.
Meantime, Biden's lone competitor, Senator Bernie Sanders, is signaling he's pressing forward, despite trailing in the delegate count. This week, he held a virtual town hall. Sanders perhaps remaining in the presidential race for months to come, since now more than a dozen states have postponed their primary elections, out of fear that in-person voting right now could spread the virus. Now, even though Joe Biden has opened up a nearly insurmountable delegate lead over Bernie Sanders, Sanders says he's actively pursuing the Democratic nomination, even says he wants to participate in a potential April debate if one happens to be scheduled. Joe Biden, though, says there have been enough debates. He wants to bring this Democratic primary to a quick close. Kristen, Peter?
No campaign stops to go to. Jeff Bennett's here in D.C. Jeff, thank you very much this morning.
Appreciate that, and we know that a lot of this can be overwhelming, but we want to make sure we're shining a light for you on some of the good news every day. Moments like this one, brave healthcare workers being cheered on for their heroic efforts. Take a look. Emotional moment there. Ashlyn Jewell is a nurse at the Swedish hospital in Seattle, and she was brought to tears by the sound of the community cheering for her and her colleagues. Her girlfriend says it's been a difficult few weeks, and those are happy tears to be recognized, appreciated, and paid enough. These are the folks on the front line.
Yeah, it gives you goosebumps, and we all across the country need to do the same and help cheer these people on, because we're going to be at this for a while. We're so grateful for them. There is a movement going on right now to help protect healthcare workers who are treating coronavirus patients with a potential shortage of masks to protect them. Some people are now taking matters into their own hands, and all they need is some cloth, needles, and thread. NBC's Carrie Sanders explains.
From Spain to Cuba to the United States, an army now at work sewing masks for healthcare professionals. Amanda Leonard with her mom Nancy, like the iconic Rosie the Riveter from the 1940s.
I think it reminds me so much of World War II. I'm a big fan of that era, and I remember seeing factories being opened and transformed to make, would make cars, and then they made airplanes, and they made war equipment. And I think that's kind of what's happening in our own garage.
One of the nation's largest fabric stores, cutting squares, making kits, for a steady stream of volunteers ready to use skills many say they learned from their grandmothers.
Some thread, the instructions on what to do, the elastics to put around the ears, and some extra fabric to make the masks.
In their garage in Central Florida, mother and daughter taking turns swapping seats. With stay-at-home now, the watch work, an opportunity to spend time together and for a daughter to learn a new skill. And this is a mission.
It is now. It feels wonderful to be able to do something to help.
The homemade masks are not designed to replace the N95 masks, which are effective. Instead, they're supposed to go over those masks because healthcare workers are having to reuse them. They're in such short supply. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Orlando.
And point out that those masks, including the one that Kerry, of course, just demonstrated, are taken to hospitals, sterilized, and then given out to healthcare workers who need them. Great thing those families are doing right now.
Absolutely. Great to see everyone pitching.
It's impossible to avoid them. For decades, we've been surrounded by sweet and fatty foods, and the body has not been dealing well with these eating habits. But what about the brain? Do our mental health, our moods, and our brain abilities suffer from the wrong kind of nutrition?
We know that junk food is making us fat, but science is telling us now that it might also be shrinking our brains.
Brain researchers have joined the dining table to study the effects of our eating habits.
Diets that are high in fat and sugar in the long term lead to changes in part of the brain involved in memory.
This is a recent field of research, a developing science that spotlights a new facet of nutrition.
Habitual intake of foods high in fat and sugar results in a reprogramming of the brain.
In short, our brain is affected by what's on our plates. It all starts with our very first meals, even before birth. The brain is built up during pregnancy. How it functions later on depends on how it has been nourished by the expectant mother's diet over 9 months. A number of consequences of poor nutrition during gestation have been known for a long time. Today, scientists in Australia are looking at the repercussions of nutrition on brain function. Felice Chaka, a professor at the University of Melbourne, examined the behavior of babies after following the eating habits of 23,000 pregnant women.
We measured their intake of junk and processed foods, we measured their intake of the helpful foods, foods with lots of fibre and nutrients, etc. And then we looked at the emotional health of their children over the first few years of life, from 18 months to 5 years. Of course, taking into account things such as education, income, the mother's mental health, parenting practices, these sorts of things. And what we saw very clearly was that mothers who ate more junk and processed foods, so sweet drinks and salty snacks and, cakes, biscuits during their pregnancy, their children had more of these behaviours such as aggression and anger and tantrums.
This disquieting correlation suggests that the mother's diet impacts the mental development of the baby, though the link remains to be demonstrated on the biological level. In any case, Felice Chaka is convinced.
So what what we also saw in this large Norwegian study is that the children's diet seemed to be important as well, independent of what mum ate. If children were eating too much junk and processed foods and or not enough of the healthful foods, they had more of these anger and aggressive type behaviours, but also sadness, anxiety, worry, nightmares.
Since then, Professor Jacka's conclusions have been confirmed by studies in Spain, the Netherlands, and Canada. Excess fat and sugar are now in the sights of scientists working on the brain. Excesses and deficiencies. Junk food is often low on essential nutrients, so it leaves the body, and especially the nerve cells, lacking. In this laboratory at the University of Bordeaux, scientists are studying the consequences of dietary deficiencies on mouse brains. This experiment is used to measure anxiety. The animal has the choice between exploring the lighted area or hiding in the shade. A normal mouse takes the time to examine the lighted area. But this animal was deprived of omega-3 fatty acids during its development. Omega-3s are called good fats due to their benefits to the heart and arteries. Instead of exploring the environment, the mouse takes refuge in a dark corner. It's stressed, anxious. The experiment has been reproduced many times on dozens of mice. For researchers, this strange behavior can be simply explained. Without omega-3 fatty acids, the brain does not develop and function normally. They're needed because the brain's gray matter is 90% fat, which it cannot produce itself.
The brain is the organ after adipose tissue that's the richest in polyunsaturated fatty acid, or omega-3. So omega-3 is indispensable because the body cannot make it. We have to ingest it. It has to come from the diet.
Oily fish, organ meat, vegetable oils, and seeds and nuts such as almonds have long been the main sources of omega-3 for humans. But these foods have become scarce in the cuisine of industrialized countries. The amount of omega-3 that enters the brain is crucial for making brain cells more efficient, because when these fatty acids are incorporated into the membranes of nerve cells, they improve their electrical properties. In omega-3 rich neurons, the signals propagate faster. The network is more efficient. Depriving the brain of omega-3 is linked to a risk that it will function less well.
The general population is deficient in omega-3. We have insufficient intake of omega-3, so it's important to pay attention to it, especially in the prenatal developmental period. During this period, omega-3 embeds itself in massive quantities into the brain. Also in adolescence, when there's often a change of food, and during aging, where the incorporation into the brain of omega-3 tends to be less effective, so we must increase its intake.
The first rule for a brain to run at full speed is avoid deficiencies. But good nutrients and a varied diet should be available. What happens to neurons when meals are poor and above all always the same? That is a problem that is now affecting the wild-living European hamster, which thrived for a long time in the plains of France's Alsace region.
Since the 1960s, there's been a decline in the hamster population, which is on the verge of extinction today. And at the same time, we've noticed an increase in the agricultural area where corn is cultivated.
Caroline Abold wondered whether the collapse of the population was linked to the sudden glut of corn. So she did an experiment, feeding hamsters exclusively corn.
During breeding, we observed behavioral disturbances in females, which resulted in hyperaggression and hypersensitivity as soon as there was noise in the room. sur ma pièce. Above all, what we did not expect is that these females would devour their young the first day after birth. This behavior was observed in more than 80% of females.
A dietary deficiency was enough to make a hamster devour its children. The cause? A simple vitamin.
A vitamin B3 deficiency is at the origin of the abnormal behavior. When we supplemented them with vitamin B3 in addition to their corn-based diet, they expressed quite normal behaviors, and they began to nurse their young, to raise them in the same way as the females that were fed a diversified diet.
The case of the cannibalistic hamsters is disturbing. Could an unbalanced diet also trigger aggressive, violent behavior in humans? Ab Zaberg is a clinical psychologist and political advisor to the Dutch Ministry of Justice. His specialty? Nutrition and crime. He's convinced that enriching food with vitamins, fatty acids, and minerals can reduce aggression. It's a hypothesis that is difficult to test in normal life because so many factors and circumstances can influence our behavior and our impulses. In order to study nutrition without the influence of the many parameters, he chose prisons as a nearly ideal setting.
In Nederland here in the Netherlands, we conducted a study of young prisoners in 8 different prisons. For 3 months, we gave them vitamins, minerals, and fatty acid supplements. And then we looked at the effect on their behavior. We measured it in 2 different ways. First, we asked the detainees how aggressive they were, and we asked the supervisors for their views on the issue. Above all, we looked at the incident log, the number of times detainees were punished, and we saw that solitary confinement had fallen dramatically.
In the group of inmates whose meals were improved, the number of incidents was reduced by 1/3. What we eat may have the power to change our moods, to stimulate certain impulses. But could the food on our plate also influence our decisions? The ones we believe we make using our free will.
When people are asked if they think that the food that they eat has an impact on health, most answer yes. But when asked if diet can also influence thoughts and decisions, very few people are willing to believe this is the case.
Das können sich viele Leute nicht vorstellen.
However, at the Institute of Psychology of the University of Lübeck in Germany, Professor So-Young Park has, for the first time, proven it. Her work reveals the mechanism by which food could influence our thoughts. And for that, the researcher has developed a rather original experiment. Imagine that you face the following dilemma. The money on the table is to be divided into 2 sums. But it's your partner, a stranger, who decides how it is to be distributed.
I give you €2 and I keep 8 for me.
If you accept the unfair offer, you leave with a little money, but much less than your partner's. If you refuse, no one wins anything. So what would you do? Do you accept the offer and take the €2 even if you feel cheated? Or do you refuse and leave with empty pockets, but your head held high? Well, it turns out, surprisingly, that whether you'll take the money or not depends on what you've just eaten.
As part of this study, we We followed 24 people who came into the laboratory twice to have two different breakfasts. We found that the same person made completely different decisions based on what they ate in the morning.
To the test person, the two breakfasts look the same. In reality, one is far more protein-rich than the other. The ratio of protein to sugar is the only parameter that changes. A few hours after the meal, the subject takes several tests on a computer. Today, he accepts the offer. His self-interest outweighs his anger at the unfairness, and he will leave with a little money in his pocket. Last week, he mainly refused and won almost nothing.
The subject, having consumed a high-protein feast in the morning, was tolerant of unfair offers. Conversely, the subject who consumed a high-carbohydrate breakfast was less tolerant in the face of unfair offers.
On average, the subjects who had little protein rejected unfair offers twice as often. But how can this surprising result be explained? In their search for biological evidence for this observation, the scientists carried out blood tests.
We will send the blood to the laboratory for analysis. We will measure the level of hormones and amino acids in the blood. For hormones, we are interested in insulin, cortisol, adrenaline, and adrenocorticotropic hormone. And for amino acids, tryptophan and tyrosine.
Of these substances, the most important is tyrosine. The amino acid is one building block of a protein that is key to brain function, dopamine. This molecule ensures communication between neurons involved in motivation and risk-taking. The results of the blood analysis show that subjects with higher levels of tyrosine in their blood are more willing to accept the unfair offer. In other words, what we eat can within hours subtly alter the chemistry of the brain and thus the communication between the neurons. Enough to guide some of our decisions. Experiments are continuing in Lübeck to confirm this result. The implications are wide-ranging.
Since we eat 3 times a day, every day, we realize that food has immense power, that of modifying and shaping mankind. So it's essential to think about how we can use food to promote our well-being and optimize our mental state.
Not only does an unbalanced diet affect our brain functions and behavior, and our meal plan interfere with daily decisions, it also becomes increasingly clear that diet plays a decisive role in our mood and possibly mental health. But what about junk food, dripping with sugar and bad fats? What would happen if we ate more of that? This is the focus of research here in Australia at the University of Sydney. Margaret Morris runs a laboratory where rats are fed the kind of junk food that you find in supermarkets or cheap fast food restaurants.
Our experiments use a range of Western foods of the type eaten by all of us. So we feed our rats meat pies, chips, cakes, and biscuits. The sorts of foods that are readily available and cheap. So we are modelling the Western world.
The first consequence of this diet, the rat doubles its food rations. The animal never seems satiated, but that's not the most surprising outcome.
One of our chief interests is the impact of this diet on the animal's memory. And we can measure this easily in the rat using a task known as the novel object and novel place task.
In this test, the researcher places objects in the rat's cage. The animal comes over immediately to examine them. Rodents are very curious by nature. Once it's completed its examination and memorized its surroundings, it's temporarily removed.
We then place the animal in the arena with one object that's been shifted.
On its return, the rat spends more time examining the object that has changed places because it already knows the other objects. They're engraved in its memory. The rats, stuffed full of bad foods, behave differently.
What we observe is the animals eating a high-fat diet or a high-sugar diet or the combined high-fat, high-sugar foods were less able to recognise, to remember that that object had moved. They explored the two objects about the same. That shows an impairment of their spatial memory.
The overfed rats have not only damaged spatial memory, but also other malfunctions that sound a warning signal for the scientists. They point to damages in the hippocampus, a small region nestled in the center of the brain. It's essential for learning and the consolidation of memory. Recent studies show that in humans, a too energy-rich diet also interferes with the hippocampus.
We see, for example, that the quality of people's diets is related to the size of their hippocampus, to the size of their grey and white matter volume, and there's starting to be intervention studies. So, for example, we see that only 4 days on junk food type diet will have an impact on cognitive functions that are related to the hippocampus.
Margaret Morris is now seeking to understand how sugary and fatty foods disrupt the brain of her rats to the point of affecting their performance. She has a hypothesis, namely, eating too much fat and sugar triggers an inflammatory reaction that spreads to the neurons.
So, in response to these foods, there's a general inflammatory response all around the body. This has been well described in obesity, but it now appears to be quite an acute response as well. And what we find is that inflammatory molecules such as cytokines are increased in response to the diet.
An overly rich diet confuses the immune system. It responds by triggering an inflammatory reaction, especially in fatty tissues. Our fat masses release substances that then propagate this inflammation throughout the body. Neurons were thought to be spared this effect behind the protective blood-brain barrier, the semi-permeable membrane that separates the circulating blood vessels from the brain.
So there's increased inflammation in the whole of the body, and we think that this may spread to the brain. That's because the blood-brain barrier, which normally protects the brain from inflammatory molecules, may be impaired, in fact, by the diet and become leaky, allowing traffic of molecules into the brain.
The inflammation infiltrates the meninges and then triggers a surprising In laboratories, Ophelia has shown in her overfed mice that certain immune cells in the brain, the microbial cells, begin to devour neurons.
These microbial cells within the brain are important. They can eat dead neurons. When they're deregulated, especially in the situation of balanced nutrition, they start to eat neurons that are alive. Therefore, by eating
Glial cells could be filmed in vitro. The images show how energetically they move. The red objects are fragments of neurons that they ingest. In an obese mouse, the activity becomes frenetic.
We've been saying to people for 30 years.
The researcher approaches it carefully with an electrode.
That's it. We made contact. And now we will be able to measure increasing glucose concentration.
This signal comes from a single cell, but in the brain, the neurons are all connected to prove with a very simple experiment. Step 1. He raised
In the 65 plus age range. 57% are fully recovered. So 4 out of our 48 tests have been performed by the Royal Romanov Provincial Laboratory. 3 in the country for testing of COVID-19. Our intention is to continue with an aggressive testing strategy to stay on top of case contact investigations, because these two elements are crucial to prevent further transmission, in addition to that in a timely way. Now I will ask Dr. Chakani.
Since then, we have interviewed this person to gather information the individual had close contact with since the those experiencing symptoms have been or are being scheduled for 14 days from the date of the rally on March 14th. This is extremely important to help contain the spread. And they determined that you will need to be. We currently have 18 cases associated with the Christopher Lake.
Love celebrating and getting together in Saskatchewan. This is not the time. This is the time for social distancing.
Fight cravings, manage weight, support healthy blood sugar, and improve digestion. I'm Autumn Smith, and I've been consuming these superfoods to play with my 4-year-old son. Number 1, organic apple cider acid, a beneficial compound in apple cider vinegar, improves satiety, and in 1 pound weight loss with no other changes. And if that were absorb more nutrients from the foods we eat. Number 2, organic turmeric. Turmeric has been documented to reduce inflammation and blood sugar, improve indigestion, nausea, and PMS symptoms, and it also has very promising anti-cancer properties. One study revealed that a compound in ginger was system. They've even been shown to help control weight. When I consume these superfoods daily, I feel the difference. Came up with a better way and created the apple cider vinegar complex. All the goodness of my trusty old wellness tea in an easy-to-take blood sugar stability, get more nutrients from the foods you eat, and feel energized. Try our organic
America and kill our people. Yikes, take a look at this. So if you're looking for honest news, pure American journalism, check out the Epic Times. Click that button below and try the paper yourself for a full month for just $1, as well as a digital format that you can read on your tablet, your
to have a meal or share a meal or have events where you are closer than often. Only go shopping if you're well. Go and just purchase essentials and about. If you have any symptoms, fever, cough, family and friends, support members in your household, neighbors by doing shopping or running chores for them, but leaving, we'll get over this. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shahab. Operator, do we have a question on the line? We have Stephanie Davis with CTV.
Yes. Are there any guidelines or rules that people coming into Saskatchewan from other provinces?
But don't go to places where you are touching, so others will touch, like doors or elevators in public places. So that's the guideline for international travelers. We did have a caution for persons coming from, but it doesn't matter if you're coming from another province in Saskatchewan or whether you live in, we need to maintain social distancing at all times. A comprehensive summary of how many the various options are being considered to streamline testing. Any plans of drive-through that are being used in maybe another related or related to household transmission cases. So we could identify the chain of transmission. That's good. While we remain concerned with travel-related cases, we now have 11 cases linked to an event. We'll identify the chain of transmission. We can account for those cases. Of the remaining cases, here we cannot find the chain of transmission, and hence we are now saying the question, because 30 of the new cases of those are part of the rally, in addition to the two identified early, the Christopher Lake Snowmobile rally concerning, at least we can explain 16 of those cases.
Mickey, do you have a follow-up?
is there a window to narrow or flatten the curve, getting less and less?
So, our case numbers continue to rise. We are tracking obviously cases linked to group events and cases linked to community. Secondly, we have significantly restricted the size of the 2-meter separation and not share food, not have it. Even if we get together as 10 people, it's healthy. If you're out shopping, washing your hands before.
Being sent to the Healthy SHA with contact. How many staff are you sending, and is there a difficulty with all the contact tracing?
So I'm very proud to say that our public health colleagues, medical health officers, it does become harder and harder to do, because what you have to do is when a case is reported, call to give test results, to do that. We have to complete case content investigations in a time. That's fine. If they develop symptoms during the 2-week,
how many new workers are being added to that?
We really need to supplement this capacity throughout Saskatchewan. So I don't have an exact number, but I fully expect that number to keep increasing and expanding. We think we're trying to stay ahead of the curve, but having said our day-to-day activities, whether they're social or for those of us who are essential, when we go to work, we either need to practice that social distancing. And the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and we have that link on our by the 29th of March, anyone who went to that rally, if they could line and seek further advice.
Take the line, operator. We have Connor O'Donovan with Global.
Hey, I'm just wondering, forgive me this information, we're at that rally, this snowmobile rally, and how many, can you go over again how many to be tested if you can't reach everybody?
So Dr. Chagall.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Doctor.
Thank you. At the Christopher, around 110 people. The positive case on the afternoon of we managed to call and let us know, because we need to fill in the gaps.
Wonderful. So I guess I'm just wondering if that gathering is being looked at.
We will follow up on that to confirm the dates and when they're effective March 16th.
Okay.
To any event, I think no one wants people to come to an event. We need to support the people who are there and are waiting on.
Operator, do we have another question on the line? We have time for. We have Evan Bradford with CJME.
Numbers from the Criminal Bonspiel and also at Christopher.
Every week we have tightened our restrictions. We are do the best we can to keep the curve as. So it's hard to make predictions. Obviously, model estimates give worst case, medium, and best case scenario.
100,000, Dr. Shah. Do you think this is enough?
Those are 698 per 100,000. So probably our partners in Roy Roanoke Provincial Lab and all our partners with testing that's happening in long-term care, acute care. This has been happening. People when they need to be tested. Head of the curve in terms of testing anyone who needs to be tested. Self-isolate yourselves at the first sign of symptoms. If thousands of tests done, 134 are positive, the rest negative. Right at the start of symptoms. You cannot go around usual till you get your test result back. And I think those steps are essential.
Thank you. Can you hear me? The question I have, I'm just
one or two cases in the PA, North, Central, South, and you can look online on that data. But two things, COVID-19 could impact any of us. It could be a healthcare provider. It can impact someone who's recently come back. And we cannot make any change in behavior depending on the of that community. I cannot emphasize that point enough.
Yes, the total number.
To potentially set up a testing lab in Prince Albert, that would be firm cases. Where are you guys on that?
Today, otherwise we'll provide a comprehensive summary of testing sites on Monday.
Hi guys, same as.
Good afternoon, and yesterday we
we were talking about the number of cases. We thought they were going to go up extensively. They did not go up. Federal and provincial in different provinces and territories flatten the curve. We'd like to think plank the curve. Let's try to make sure we flatten the curve about COVID-19 as we watch the various scenarios unfolding in different countries. Let's get those numbers from Dr. Yaffe today.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now haven't had any new deaths since yesterday. We're still at the total of 144 cases. This is an increase of 100 from the United States of cases. And this is already quite higher than 81,394 cases. In terms of the numbers is going down. We were over 10,000, now we're just around 8, and so more work to be done, but it's going the right direction.
The backlog in the laboratory testing and how many other satellite laboratories are opening up and then picking up. I think the other aspect is we want around about 790 in that regard. Their quarantine order. We are still trying to get the numbers there, and then how are these individuals going to be denoted? Are informed of what they're supposed to do, and not only will they be informed in that regards, because I think for the most part they want to do what's right, understand the order properly for their period of 14 days, assuming the fact they're all coming across asymptomatic, and then how they would be tested if they needed to be, if they develop symptoms, and so that it's coming back in the country, putting in supplies and materials. This is a very critical thing as we try to and making sure that everyone gets some, but the priority ones get first, but we don't want anyone left out, so we have to keep monitoring that through our regional offices of Ontario, that when we need it and when we ramp up with any further cases that are not totally elective, that still need to be dealt with in a timely fashion. Care they need, if it's not elective, then it's on urgent or semi-urgent basis, because during this time of preparation, we want to make sure that and with that, our emergency department visits, assessment centers, a large number of them up and running, because we have, as well as the hospital admissions and the occupancy down to quite a bit of a low in 10 years. So they're building up that care facilities and the retirement homes and other venues that we're looking at on of what we might be able to open up quickly to increase our capacity, looking at those and how we might have to proceed. So all things are moving, and as well as with the cabinet and update on that, so that they are fully appraised, order and actions therein. So those are the generals to school closures post-March break. Is one to be monitored. We're backlog of tests, so a few tests are only a thing to monitor to see how the trend goes over the next 4 or 5 days, being separated. And it's like gathering and isolation all at the same time. It seems like an oxymoron, but really well, and I applaud the Ontarians for doing that. The retail industry for stepping up. It still delivers the essential services while protecting their in a safe and a timely way while trying to stay home and to honor that aspect as well. So with that, I'm going to open up and thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll take the first question.
Hi there. I asked the minister.
Could you move closer to your microphone? You faded there.
We can't hear you. Can you come closer to your phone?
I'm just hearing a bit of an echo.
That's better.
So, used with COVID patients and are warning that their EU will fill up in the coming days with COVID patients. Health alluded to the possibility of shuffling caseloads to other hospitals anywhere in the province.
Oh, thank you. And that we haven't heard others talk about that current reporting. If there are cases, they don't all present equally throughout. When they're being transferred by, say, paramedics to a different person at that time, and how we would do that to maintain at least. So we're going to have to be nimble and to keep the data up and keep responding.
Follow-up?
Hi there, sorry about that. How many COVID tests are we currently daily? You talked about working to clear the backlog. The government suggested the target will hit 5,000 weeks end. Are we going to hit that target? And what is the estimate on being able to clear the backlog?
So I'll let you try. I did my own back Dr. Yaffe.
Okay, sure. I know we're go ahead.
Hi there, doctor. I'm just wondering.
Well, we are not aware.
Is still small, but that would be a good one to collect or to uncover maybe a suspected case in that, and just need confirmation.
Okay, next question.
Doctors, I'm just wondering about the supply of 55 million.
That they could be used for fit testing, because then it's an elastic band. That's the way we continue to ramp up our supplies and orders with all the other ones coming in. And I want to do, one thing we're trying to differentiate is the big concern a lot of the other provinces is the public and parks and on the streets, etc., and that, or what you call essential services such as retail, food that are actually tabled, or you're talking about internal things as in acquire those essential services and yet not compromise on their aspects of physical.
Could you also maybe talk about what kind of effect you hope that the plan by the federal government, if they have symptoms, how that would affect just overall rates in Ontario?
Because the federal government did announce concerns with travel, domestic disembarking, or going on a flight or something here across into other provinces. If you're symptomatic, you shouldn't be at the airport anyway. You should be home. And so you should not be flying. You should not be traveling the train. We haven't had a lot that would say traveled from province X or province Y have come over from our province to theirs. They want to share the information, or the other way around, because we would want to do case contact back here that they might have been symptomatic already in one province, and they need to know that information. So,
Kelly, we're having trouble hearing you. We're just having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay, I'm as close to the phone as I can be here. I understand the reasons why on the ground, but I imagine in terms of tracking cases, we're going to test it positive.
Yes, we looked at that. We're trying to of syndromes, a syndromic of respiratory. You don't say, well, we have to wait for the circulating. There is not much need to go any further than that, because you'd already undertaken your steps previously to vaccinate all those residents for using Tamiflu to treat them proactively, so you try and curtail any outbreak. There's a certain level of shortness of breath because of their comorbidity. So it is the long-term care staff to notice that there's a change, if you may, in the person's status, and that and as far as our testing, we may choose to test more at this time in the case of an outbreak, simply because people are addressing the uniqueness of the COVID-19 as is Ministry of Long-Term Care.
Follow-up?
Yeah, what reason would there be to not just test everybody in the nursing home? Like, can you go ahead with it?
Two or three reasons. One is that so you've got to do something a bit more timely and effective and efficient than doing testing all the time. So we're looking at ways we might do that to monitor that better in the public sector, traveling sector, returning symptomatic, and
para los 2 años. Claro, les aseguran que retornemos con ellos eternamente.
Exactamente, en las mismas condiciones cuando no tenía discos de platino ni llenaba auditorios.
No, déjate de volar. Es una relación personal. Aunque está aquí la cosa.
Mañana empezamos, tira, no te da tiempo de ir a ver.
Pero que no tengo tiempo de que se siga pisando. ¿Sí? A ver si se te dejan de la cara de tú mañana te vas a Panamá, pues bien, ¿vale? Y ellos tendrán cuando tenga todo ordenado.
Como tú quieras.
Javier, hablamos más tarde.
Pues tú no probar. Nos conocemos. Imagínense lo que me apasionaba. Ver, en mi opinión, yo me lo pregunto, ¿qué lo voy a hacer esto? ¿Qué lo puedo hacer el traductor? Sí, sí. Ay, por muchas gracias. No sé. Bueno, en mi opinión, en principio las canciones son bellísimas y en segundo lugar, creo que dan para unos arreglos increíbles. Mantenimiento, no, es muy claro, por favor. Imagínate darle una cable, presentárselo con un público, una nueva generación. ¿Sabes cómo? Te propongo algo más. ¿Por qué no nos encanta? Podemos prestarle y no pasa nada. Nos divertimos en la serie. Muy bien. Muchísimas gracias. Ay, por favor, dale oro. Nos vemos pronto. Sí, claro. No, caramba. Sí. Hola, Fede, ¿cómo estás? Me habla Luis Miguel. ¿Todo bien? ¿Qué hablas? Fede. Oye, niño, no va a pasar, coño. Ya lo de... Escucha esta parte. Ya tengo todas las canciones grabadas, 54 minutos de calidad musical, por eso quería pensar para los que escucharlo. La verdad es que la grabación suena muy bien, muy bien. Gracias, porque solo tengo que invertir en la distribución de la gira. Mira, Luis, nosotros ahora solo estamos sacando los jóvenes. Tenemos ya todo lo que me ha grabado. Tengo que hacer una avanzada con los mil copias. Cassette, vinilo, CD, vinilo, CD, cassette.